One of my all-time favourite plants is Monstera. I have so many of them in my collection. I sometimes rescue them from people who don't want them anymore, so I repot them, think I'll pass them on, but they end up staying in my care just because I love these plants so much. I've had Monstera for about 20 years since having houseplants, and there are so many things that I've learned along the way through trial and error. I've unintentionally killed a plant or two. So in this video, I'm going to share some of the things that I have learned about Monstera, how to keep them happy. So let's get going. One of the things especially I've learned about Monstera, thrips seem to love them. I felt so disheartened in the beginning when I saw pests, especially on this beautiful variegated Monstera. I worked so hard at growing such a tall, beautiful plant, and in the beginning when I saw pests on it, I felt really disheartened and quite annoyed. But I've now come to live with it because I just know that if we bring nature and plants into our space, it's part of the parcel and we just have to live with it. It's tricky when you've got so many plants in your space and you can't always get to them as quickly as you should do because you can't always spot it early enough. However, when you know what thrip damage looks like and you've had it in your plants and you've had to deal with it, you kind of know what the signs are and you spot it really quickly and really easily. There's a leaf up here, I think. Yes, there's a leaf up here that's got some thrip damage, and I will give you a bit of a close-up so that you can look out for what thrip damage looks like on your Monstera. There are many different ways in which you can treat thrips. When I see an infestation or the start of thrips, I use a horticultural soap to begin with, and that seems to keep it at bay. However, there are some nematodes that you can use, and I will link some of the nematodes that I have used for thrips in the comments below so that you can see what kind of nematodes I've used that are really, really effective. I'd also like to know if you've battled with thrips before, what do you use to kill that thrip cycle? Because there is a real thrip cycle that needs to be stopped to stop the reproduction of them. So let me know what you use to keep thrips at bay. I'm always so interested to hear what other people do with their plant care. Also let me know, have you battled with thrips with your Monstera, or do they navigate to your other plants, or a bit of both? I find them super annoying because they can really damage the leaves of your plants if you're not careful. And yeah, I have had some thrip damage on these leaves. I'll show you a close-up of what it looks like. So next time when you spot your leaves being discolored, make sure to check the top and the bottom part of your leaves, especially the bottom, because I find that thrips love the bottom part of leaves. And the quicker you spot it, the quicker and easier it would be to treat. The growth of my Monstera definitely elevates if I give it the right light, the right pot, and some fertilizer. So let's start with the right light. Monstera plants love a bright spot, but out of direct sunlight. In the beginning, when I started to have Monstera, I made the mistake of placing my Monstera, it was a Monstera deliciosa, in a very bright spot in direct sunlight. The leaves just scorched, and unfortunately, if it goes beyond the point of rescuing the plant, there is no coming back from a scorched leaf. I know some people like to leave them outside during the summer months as well, in warmer countries, which you can absolutely do, but just make sure that you check that it's not in direct sunlight, because I have been caught out with a burnt Monstera in direct sunlight. I find the brighter the light, the more the plant grows. If the plant is in a darker corner, it gets quite leggy and it's got some stunted growth. So make sure that you have a bright spot, but never direct sunlight, because you could just have some scorched leaves on your beautiful plant. I'm going to take this variegated Monstera back to its spot. I am preparing myself for it because it's hit the ceiling. It's not an easy plant to move. But then I'm going to bring an even bigger plant in, a Monstera deliciosa, because I want to show you what a Monstera in a small pot looks like. I really need to repot it. So let me move this one back, get the other one in. It's a bit of an operation to make sure I don't cut the branches off and I don't take any of my other plants out. So bear with me, I'll be back in a minute. Oh my gosh. That was tricky. Oh, I really need my new plant room and I cannot wait to move in. Anyway, this is a Monstera deliciosa that, you know, when you place a plant in your room, which is quite small and manageable, it's happy in a corner, and then all of a sudden it grows into this giant plant and it's just taking over and you're a little bit scared to move it. That's what this plant has done. It's grown a whole new section that's not even attached to my moss pole, my choir pole, and it's just a bit out of control. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to show you this plant is because I was going to talk about the right pot. I find if my Monstera doesn't have the right size pot, the plant just completely topples over, which is exactly what this plant is doing. So I need to hold on to it. You can very quickly see, I don't even know if I can lift it, but this plant has just outgrown the pot that it's in. The leaves are too heavy and the choir pole's the right size. However, the pot is just too small. I've got aerial roots coming out all over. I've got roots poking out the bottom of the pot. And the reason I haven't repotted it is just because I don't have enough space at the moment. I'm waiting to move into my new plant room so that I can have a bit of space to repot this beautiful Monstera. It has also not outgrown the pole, but it's just grown so much that the plant needs to be reattached to the pole to give it better support. So make sure to check if your pot is toppling over, if the height and the width of the plant just looks out of proportion with your pot, then it's time for a bigger pot. Depending on how small the current pot is, I tend to go maybe 4 centimeters in diameter bigger, just to give that plant a little bit of extra support. So make sure to check your pots and give it the right size pot and support to keep that plant happy and climbing. I really notice a difference in my plants if I fertilize or if I don't. I fertilise during the summer months, into the autumn months, and sometimes even into the winter months if I see new growth on my plants. If I ever don't fertilise a plant, it just slows down the growth completely. So if you are not fertilising your plants, I can really recommend it. The reason why we would fertilise is because when plants are in pots like these, their nutrients can very quickly run out, and when they're in the wild and they've got decomposed leaves and bugs crawling around, it fertilizes the plant naturally. However, when they're in our space and they don't have that natural process around them to fertilize the plants, their nutrients and their pots can run out really quickly. So it's up to us to keep the nutrients topped up and to fertilize the plant to keep it happy and healthy. I use a liquid fertilizer just normally with my water, and I fertilize it whenever I see new growth for any of my plants. There's a new growth coming up here, so I will continue to fertilise this beautiful Thai constellation even into autumn, possibly into winter. However, I will slow down on my fertilisation if I think the plant is slowing down and going dormant during the winter months. I'd love to know, do you fertilise your plants? Did you know before what fertilising was doing to our plants? There's no judgment here. I'm always curious to hear what you do with your plants. So let me know in the comments if you fertilise or not. And if you do you use a liquid fertilizer, or I know you get these granules as well that you can stick into the soil? Let me know about your fertilizer. I'd love to hear. When it comes to watering, Monstera can be one of the most forgiving plants in my experience for if you are missing a watering day. I don't have a set watering schedule. I have too many plants and I've naturally become an underwaterer with my plants because I can't quite get to all of them in time. I find my Monstera, the leaves tend to curl in a little bit and then I know it's time to water. I might water every 2 weeks or so, maybe a little bit more frequently in the summer months, but Monstera can be one of the easiest plants when it comes to watering. They are forgiving and they can still thrive if you don't water as frequently as you need to for a begonia or a peace lily, for example. I always recommend that it's best to underwater rather than overwater a plant. If we overwater, the roots of the plant can rot and the plant can die, whereas if we underwater ever so slightly, the plant can always plump back up if we give it a drink and it just comes back to life. I recently repotted a Monstera and the roots were one of the most root-bound plant roots that I have ever seen. I had to place a coir pole in the middle, which means I had to disturb the roots of the plant because it didn't have a coir pole in before. So as I disturbed the roots to get the coir pole into the middle, potted the plant up, I found the plant went into transplanting shock. Also possibly because some of those roots were damaged in the process and it meant that some of those leaves went yellow, and I trimmed the roots off and the rest of the plant is now healthy and growing. So I do find that sometimes, depending on how much root disturbance there is for a Monstera, the plant can go into transplanting shock, which is very normal. I tidied up the yellow leaves, I tidied up the plant, and the plant is now thriving and is happy in a bright spot downstairs in my house. Have you ever found transplanting shock with your Monstera? What did you do to treat it and how did you overcome it? Is the plant still alive? Let me know in the comments. Monstera plants can propagate really well, and in my experience you can propagate by root division by simply taking the plant out of the pot and splitting by root, or as I've done for my variegated Monstera, the plant was getting so tall I've had to chop the stems and pop the plant with a node in water, and I have these beautiful rooted plants now that are ready for some soil. They propagate super easy, and even with the variegated Monstera that I showed you earlier, the leaf that I received came unrooted. Placed it into water. I changed the water regularly, maybe every 7 to 10 days, just to prevent any algae from forming. And before you know it, you've got some beautiful healthy roots, and you can place it into soil and you have a brand new plant. Have you propagated your Monstera before? Did you propagate it by root division or by stem cutting? Let me know how you've done it. When repotting Monstera, I've learned the hard way that the right soil is so important. When I first started my houseplant journey, I used a very basic shop-bought soil that was really dense for my plants, and I just found that the roots of the plant couldn't breathe, and very often it got too waterlogged in the soil, the roots got soggy and the plant died. So I've learned to mix my own soils together. I use some bark, some perlite, some worm castings, and I'll leave an example of what some of my chunky soil mixes look like on here. This is what I use for Monstera. I just find it a nice chunky aerated soil, And whenever I repot my Monstera, I make it as chunky and as aerated as I possibly can. I know my Monstera love this chunky soil mix, and when I water my plant from the top down, I know the water drains through freely. You don't want that water sitting in the middle or the bottom of your pot because it could just cause some root rot and it could kill your plant. So if you don't mix your own soils together, I would really recommend adding a nice chunky bark at least, or some perlite, just to make it a nice aerated soil. If you can't find coco coir, if you can't find worm castings, it's not a problem, but I think at least as a minimum, I would really recommend adding some chunky bark and some perlite just to make it a nice aerated soil. Cleaning the leaves is also really important. It doesn't just remove temptation for pests to form, but it helps the plant to photosynthesize by grabbing necessary energy and resources from the sun, and also it just makes your plant look really nice, lush and green. I love spending a bit of time just wiping the leaves of my plants, and it's so satisfying just seeing some of that dust that comes off the plant. It's also a really good opportunity to check for pests, and I sometimes use a microfiber cloth or glove, but other times I just use a damp kitchen towel, a paper towel, and I just spend a bit of time just to wipe the leaves on my plant. It's amazing the amount of dust that can come off when you wipe your leaves of your Monstera especially, and it's such lovely wide green leaves. There's such a temptation for pests to form the top and the bottom part, and even on the stems. So as you're passing your plants and as you're spending a bit of time, what just dropped there? A bit of a leaf. And as you're spending a bit of time just to clean it, make sure to check for pests top, bottom and on the stem. I'd love to hear how you care for your Monstera. Is there anything that I've missed off that you do with your plants that help them thrive? Let us all know in the comments below. I just think it's lovely to have a plant community where we can all learn from each other. Also, if you've got any questions about any of your other plants, always ask away in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye.